We believe that 2018 will be still not a year where we can be very generous. I think the austerity measures that we have introduced, the consolidation path has to be followed through. But of course we also learned from 2017 that the consolidation or the austerity measures that we did put in place had a negative impact on growth. It had a negative impact on employment. That's a factual situation. So we need to be very responsive to the fact that, or the quest that what interventions we take on need to be responsive to those others. We need to concentrate on growth stimulating interventions, but that growth is of high quality, namely it must create jobs and it must not perpetuate a job losing economic year.
Mr. Time, the Minister just talked to us about the macro view as far as the economy is concerned. You're a businessman and you do business in various sectors. From the various sectors that you're involved in, how has 2017 been?
Yeah, I think best to describe it is to say it's very representative of the wonderful presentation we had just now on the local economy. We generally see slight decrease in volumes from the manufacturing point of view and pressure on the retail side and coming from the demand, of course. So that's very representative of what was said about the economy, but that is not an excuse for not performing, not looking at how you can do things differently. And I think over years already we have been making sure that we do things very differently with breakthrough thinking, that we are a little less affected by the current situation.
Let's take the property sector where you're also involved in. How has it performed? How has the experience been?
Yeah, obviously the pressure on the property sector is, especially if it comes to residential, is large. I think examples of Swakopmund, I'm not so sure how that's going to look like, whether it's the bubble that's going to burst soon. Other than that, we had obviously over the years major investments in retail property, such as the Growth Mall, and you can see the Bernhill now, we're basically doubling. So from that point of view, it's fairly positive. But again, one can see in some of the shopping centers, which we also manage, that we have some empty spaces and especially local shops under pressure, which is sad to see. Whereas more the international franchises and brands are funded by, if they're making loss, they're funding by their mother companies.
We're just coming out of the festive period. For instance, if you take the breweries, how has sale been?
Yeah, as I said, we have pressure on the volume, but again we have also diversified ourselves together with South Africa, yeah, I think we can be very proud how we're doing despite that. Yeah, it's not a good question for the right business, because that one is going to do quite well this year. Maybe some other questions also, but yeah, no, I think we're doing very good on that one. Obviously, but as I said, volumes under pressure.
Ms. Dilula, let me get to you. The financial sectors and the services sector, how has the experience been?
Well, I think as we have also seen last year, there's been a bit of contraction in terms of credit to not just in terms of consumer credit, but also credit to businesses. Given the influence of the government as a contributor to the economy, of course the knock-on effect to businesses' ability to generate the necessary cash flow has strained their ability to service their facilities with banks. And that obviously makes banks more cautious in terms of granting credit. But I think the just linking to the experience of 2017 and the challenges that we're facing, I think these are the opportunities that allows entrepreneurs to do things differently, as Swen said. So although credit has been limited, there are other alternative instruments in the market that I would encourage business people to explore more, such as private equity, which provides more patient capital for business growth. But that obviously also implies that as business people, we have to think about business ventures that are more contributing to growth and get out of the, what I would refer to, the comfort zone under which we've been doing business in this country. I think if you compare ourselves to many other economies where growth has been significant, as was cited by Hamonima, a number of those economies are growing higher despite much more challenging circumstances than Namibia.
And I appreciate the fact that a credit extension would have slowed down, would have been restricted. But where you have extended credit, in which sectors did that tend to be mostly?
Well, if I should speak for the subsector in which I'm involved, which is an alternative finance class, so venture capital and other forms of debt, we've had a dampened year, but we've not done bad at all. I think with a specialist focus in the SME sector, we've positioned ourselves very well, and we actually have performed and provided growth capital to SMEs. Looking at the balance of other players in the sector, I would say growth has been mild, but on the positive side as well in terms of extension of both debt as well as equity investments. And we're actually going to be celebrating it soon, $1 billion lending towards the SME sector. So there are opportunities to finance. There are entrepreneurs that I think are robust enough and seeing the investment opportunities that they need to capitalize on. And I think it's really for people to understand where to go for what kind of credit and to apply their own assessment, what you need, what type of financing you need in the specific growth stage that the business finds itself.
Honorable Minister, you talk about fiscal consolidation finding shape. And last year, when you talked to us during your midterm review in November, previously you would tell us that this is not a platform for additional spending, but rather reorganizing the spending within the ceilings that you have set yourself. But we saw that during your midterm review last year, you expenditure. Does that really speak to the pressure that exists for public expenditure?
Okay, I will answer that question just now, but before I do that, let me reflect on the following. When we compared growth patterns in the presentation of African regions, and we were seeing, for instance, that East Africa is growing at 5%. Now, and that is true, it is correct. But what one must see in tandem with that is the debt take-up of that region. And it follows very similar patterns than our fat years, where we also grew at 5 or 5.5%. And that was mainly driven by debt take-up. So if we look, for instance, at Ethiopia, not that I want to talk for them, I think we soon will see that debt take-up is hitting the ceiling, and they will then have to deal with stabilizing the fiscus. So growth is one thing, but I think debt sustainability is, and we must look at that at the same time. And that is what our economy is going through. We have to readjust the economy. And debt sustainability was not only a problem in the public sector, it was equally a problem in the private sector. there was a unfortunate coincidence or accumulation of similar problems and risks in both public and private domains. So, and that readjustment, we believe the core of that is to align expenditure to revenue. That's one bottom line. The second issue is that that expenditure that we are then forking out must be improved quality spending. So we must target better, and we must make sure that the pro-growth, the quality of growth is improved through that expenditure. So the line that we will take is not solve problems by spending more, but by spending better. And there are a number of facets. Now it's SOE review, it is our own review, it's what His Excellency the President said yesterday in a very clear message. We must clamp down seriously on illicit activities, on corruption. Those are all eroding quality of spending in a very significant way. And I think we can look forward to the fact that government is now demonstrating its serious will to clamp down on these very negative, very bad practices that were in part the cause of our pressures that developed. Now to your question, what is it actually that we are doing to return, and whether the expansion or the additional spending in the mid-year budget review is in line with consolidation. Now what happened is the fact that the unpaid invoices accumulated and caused harm in the private sector, forced private sector to take up debt instead of growing their investment. That became very painful for the economy, and we had to take a decision whether we want to endure that pain, worsen that situation for the private sector, or whether we should take a decision, an approach where we say we stall consolidation for a moment to bring relief in the economy and expand the budget by paying the outstanding invoices, and that brought about an injection in cash into the economy, which by and large was used to pay debt instead of grow the economy. But at the end of the year, that action started to grip, and we saw some relief, some growth turning back, some demand improving, some consumption improving. So that was a conscious decision that we take. But you can say, yes, unpaid invoices consumed our consolidation benefits that we had anticipated in the budget. So what that means is we are now back to square one. We have to maintain consolidation, but what we have also learned is that the consolidation maybe is better if it is milder and not as harsh as we started. The harsh step that we had to take was to stop a sliding bus. If we wouldn't have taken it, I think we would not only have consumed that part of the gain in consolidation, we would actually not have stabilized the fiscus. So I think we are very positive that the steps were the right and correct steps to do, but now we have to adjust and be responsive to what it caused and how we tweak it to remain on course of consolidation, but put more emphasis on growth and the quality of growth.
Briefly, a follow-up on that. When you talk about consolidation, where is it? Is it where do you see it happening? Is it the debt level? Is it suggesting that you have consolidated? Is it the budget deficit ratio? Or where can you pinpoint that you're actually consolidating? You've got hold on things here.
For the last financial years. That's from 15 on. Our ratio of debt to GDP is in decline. Our deficits are reducing. So the ratios of what caused pressure are improving. And that is in spite of very, very flat growth. So the consolidation is more on the expenditure side and not on the growth side. And I think that is what we see, a consolidation unfolding. But what I said earlier, we will not be completely out of the woods in 1 year. We believe that the consolidation must be over longer periods because of the fact that, too sharp consolidation has, in an economy where the public sector is 60% of the total economy, and action that really has very serious negative impacts on the economy as a whole, especially on the private sector, which is much smaller.
Mr. Time, when the government is busy with the things that the Honorable Minister has just alluded to, what should the private sector be doing in identifying and seizing opportunities that exist in the economy?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, I think the private sector need to unite, and that's a very interesting project that we've embarked on. It's not that easy to unite the private sector, to prevent 120 submissions on NIF as opposed to 1, for example, and I think it's still going too well for many people. People don't understand where we are. Instead of really uniting and coming up with solutions, we're still having our own agendas here and there. What could the private sector do? I think we can become, if we are a serious partner to government, we can come with an open, I think we have an open debate with government to see what are the areas where we can work together. I think there's this wonderful African proverb which says, if we want to move mountain, we have to pick up the stones today. And picking up the stones today is for sure, I think we need to be thinking completely different. And even if it's a bad idea today, but aggressive, such as education, where I believe that with the current spending, we could actually reduce the spending and look at technologies such as the NBC, not that I'm now promoting the NBC here, and there's no conflict of interest at all because this is in favor of the public, that we use a channel like that for educational purposes, maybe going the iPad route where you've got children to have access to education, and I'm talking world-class education. If you just think that the kids that we have here that have to compete with world kids elsewhere that get from day one world-class or mostly excellent education, then it's tough. It's really, really tough. And then I think also, I mean, Kalle said it many times before, and also government, we need to do everything that addresses inequality and poverty and growth, of course, of the country. We need to identify strategic areas which we want to have the local value add, to really grow, and support local. And I think that everybody understands that every single cent that we add value in the country is to the benefit of our people and a job. Every single cent we export in raw material or import is an export of a job. And I think if we understand that, then we are halfway there. And other measures, quite honestly, there needs to, any successful economy is based on discipline, proper discipline, and that includes not buying farms as an example that shouldn't be bought, or other different things, and that's what we discussed earlier as well. Some of that corruption is not only that the money is being useful for the wrong things, but it leaves the country, so we're getting double penalized. And then I think we need to be as aggressive, like I would like to convert that new Home Affairs building into a school or something like that. We as in quite a successful business, we upgrade old offices, but here we are, investing, and that's what our Minister of Finance always says, we will only invest going forward in productive assets that brings money, and not just a fancy office.
You also serve as president of the Namibia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We have seen several layoffs during the course of last year as well as 2016. When you engage your members, what were they saying? Were those taken as last resort, or was it the first option available and they would just send people home?
Yeah, of course, everybody needs to speak for themselves, but yeah, I think in our case we are trying every single possible way not to put any person on the street, but it's easy to talk when you are fairly diversified. I think for many of the smaller operations, or an operation is just one business field or industry, it's difficult then to apply such thinking. So I don't think people would do that without wanting it, or not wanting, people are forced to do it, but just waking up in the morning to see how we can lay off people. Nobody wakes up with that dream. And so, yeah, I think those need to speak for themselves. But what we need to do is all have a collective responsibility to build local businesses, and by procuring locally and forcing, even if the quality or price is not right, one needs to work together, because we need to take the people off the street, otherwise they take us into the street.
All right. Ms. Dulula, you earlier on referred to private equity as an investment option that people should consider favorably. What makes it so attractive at the moment?
I think in general, private equity is an attractive asset class for very specific businesses. For example, if you look at manufacturing, starting a manufacturing business with debt finance is very unideal. The best option is probably to get an equity partner that comes in to bring the necessary capital and skills, technical skills, to unlock the potential that such a business holds. I think given where we're coming from, the traditional way of financing businesses have always been debt, and we've become accustomed to that without considering whether it's really the most efficient structure for businesses. So it is attractive now, but it has been attractive as an option, just looking at principles. The value, obviously, for the Namibian environment is that it could give opportunity for strategies such as a growth at home. We've been talking about strengthening our manufacturing base, but to do that we need the right kind of funding to ensure that people can achieve that. We have significant competencies as Namibia. I think Namibia and South Africa have certain competencies that can be taken into the rest of the continent, but without that ability to actually expand our operation and competencies in the region, we will be only focusing on the market of Namibia, which is small, and I think we have to look outside and use that asset class to expand into the rest of the continent, such as East Africa.
Thank you very much. Let's just have another round of applause for the panelists, please. Let's look into 2018. The prospects, the outlook, the expectations. Honorable Minister, Mr. Shimi and the colleagues are telling us that 2018 should be a good year. They are estimating a growth of around 2.2%. Do you agree with that? Is that your position as well? And what are the things that are likely to contribute to this expected growth?
Yeah, well, I think we all have gone through the same set of figures. We do support it. I think there will be, in our projections too, mild growth around the 2% mark, maybe a little bit slower, but thereabout. The more important question is therefore not to restate the statistics that actually are taking a status quo approach as the base. I think what we have to discuss is what are we going to do different, and that is what Sven said, to move away from that status quo if we want to have enhanced growth. Now if we ask that and if we entertain that question, I think we have to, on the social side, address inequality. inequality is the mother of all problems. And let me give you an example. Only 5% of the Namibian population has access to legal representation in the private sector. 95% not. Only 14% have access to private medical cover. 85% or 86% have not. Those are two striking examples which speak to nothing else but inequality. Now, if we leave out 80% of the population in our economic activities, that's a massive loss to the economy. And that is what we have to address. We have talked about the education system, about other systems, how we do. Now, our perception is that there are structural problems underlying the poor performance of, for instance, education. And we believe that the education system as it is structured today, as it is funded today, is more teacher-centered than child-centered. We must go back. We must go back to a child-centered education system. If we look at the legal system is lawyer-centered, not client-centered. If we not go back and make sure that the funds that we have available bring the necessary services to the clients, we will not see growth and the benefits of good service provision in that. So structurally, we have to rethink how and when we spend money. The question should always be, is the child benefiting in education? Is the client benefiting? While, of course, profitability and viability of the businesses is not placed in jeopardy.
Now, Honorable Minister, today being the 9th of February, I get the feeling that your budget statement for this year, you're probably just working on the cover page. How is it likely to differ from what you presented last year?
I think you have to wait for 2 weeks or so to hear the difference, which I can't give it now.
Priority-wise, they remain the same, or there are new areas that you would want to focus on?
Well, I think a budget as it was defined is a document which, or it's an exercise actually, where the public sector puts money where its mouth is. That's the implementation document of policies that we have agreed and that we have promised to implement. There are no big bangs. I think you cannot this year have a priority set like that and next year you throw all things away and start afresh and have a complete different set. I think therefore the principal policy drive will be the same. It will be continuing what we have started. That is a pro-growth consolidation, a improved spending approach to better use the scarce resources that we have. And there are elements in that approach that, of course, will be having more emphasis or less emphasis, and that is the tweaking exercise that we will do. So the main drive will be the same. The main drive will be to address poverty, to tackle inequality, to stimulate growth, while at the same time not undoing the macroeconomic stability and the fiscal stability that we have. We should not sacrifice achievements with too ambitious goals.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause there. We now open the floor to the floor for an interaction. There's a lady here. Any mic nearby? We're meant to, yes. Thank you. Over here, if you can.